Hello, today's video is about the little engine that could. You remember that old kid story about the little train engine? Chugga, 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 I think I can, I think I can, I think I can. Here it is, the little cartridge that could, the 6.5 Grendel. Before we get into the details of our little cartridge that could, I want to point out one of the enjoyable books in the Hunter's Library. This is A Hunter's Wanderings in Africa by a gentleman named Frederick Courtney Salou, who started hunting in Africa when he was 19 years old, all by his lonesome. And this was pre-cartridge days, folks, 1871. He was only 19 years old. That is crazy. He went on to be one of the most successful and revered hunters in Africa and has some fascinating stories right here in this book, if you can find a copy. This is a reprint done by Briar Patch Press. These are the same people who bring you Sporting Classics magazine. I don't know if it's still available. This was in a special series they had done with fancy leather covers and everything. It's a great book. I must have read it 3 or 4 times already. See if you can get a hold of one of those. Go to the library. I think you'll really enjoy it. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is patrons. Our patrons suggested this, as they often do. So if you would like to join our Patreon community, just go to patreon.com and then Ron Spomer Outdoors, and you can join us and help support our programming. We appreciate it. Thanks. Now, why would anyone want to invent such a puny little cartridge? You know, we came out with the 6.5 by 55 Swede way back in 1892. And that was a real popular cartridge in Sweden and Norway and Northern Europe and pretty much all over Europe, but really never got over here until, gosh, I don't think it was until the 1970s or so that I think Federal started loading for it because it just hung on and hung on. It's just a great, mild recoiling, fast enough, shoots good enough, heavy enough bullets to be just a great all-round deer hunting cartridge. Well, the U.S. didn't pay much attention to the 26 calibers because all of the 6.5s are 26s. And as popular as they are now, they sure weren't back in the 20th century. Winchester tried with the 264 Win Mag, Remington with the 6.5 Rem Mag. And then in the 80s, I think, or 90s it was, before we came out with that 260 Remington, which is the 308 neck down. But then it really started to pick up steam, especially when that 6.5 Creedmoor came out. And a lot of folks go, why the Creedmoor? That doesn't go any faster than that old 6.5 Swede, and it really doesn't, especially if you load it up to modern pressures. So why, if you already have a kind of the bottom of the heap 6.5 in that Creedmoor, why would anyone want to go even smaller? I mean, that is crazy. But there's a good reason. This was created by a gentleman who was with the British military, and he came over here and he wanted to design a cartridge that would be more effective in the military rifles, the AR-15 autoloaders. So he had, of course, stay within the 223 Remington length. And he did that, but you want more bullet, so he went with the 6.5. And there was a cartridge out called the PPC. There's actually 2 of them, and they came on strong in the 1970s. And those were really big in target shooting competitions. So that case actually came from the 7.62 Russian, 7.62 by 39 Russian was the original case for the PPC. So this Bill Alexander with Alexander Arms used one of those 2 to start creating this little guy. And it worked. I mean, it did what he wanted to do. It keeps it transonic. Supersonic bullets, I think it's the 123 grain, they stay until 1,200 yards. It's still going faster than the speed of sound, and that's a big deal because bullets become unstable when they go to that transonic range and they start doing goofy things. So to keep them accurate, you want to keep that velocity up. That does it. And it also keeps the foot-pounds of energy surprisingly high at some pretty significant distances. So he had a lot of success with that in the ARs. Sammy made it an official commercial cartridge, legitimized it, I think, in 2010. So that's not a very old cartridge. Started picking up steam fairly quickly among the AR shooters. They really loved it because it gave them a lot more horsepower than that 223. But The big change for hunters, I think, came when they started chambering it in bolt action rifles. And if I'm not mistaken, Howa was the first one to do it in their double lug bolt action rifle. And they have it in the mini action. And this thing is really small. As you can see, this little guy isn't like 2.5 inches long. The case itself, I think, only comes to 1.5 inches. It is just really tiny. So it is fitting into a light, short bolt action rifle. And the Howa, they guarantee an inch accuracy, MOA accuracy out of their rifles. And when they chamber it for this guy, it does surprisingly well. We're going to look at some numbers on our charts here and compare it to some other cartridges. Now, you might think the one to compare it to, of course, is the Creedmoor. Now, what have I got up here? Is this my, this is my Swede. I was picking up somebody else. Was this my 270? No, that's my 55. What's this guy? I must have grabbed 265s, huh? Yeah, I've got 255s rolling here instead of a Creedmoor. I've got to pop me a box of Creedmoor out. Where have I got a Creedmoor? Right here. Got to have a Creedmoor on the table because most people assume that 6.5 is going to compare pretty favorably to a Creedmoor. Just a little bit slower, but let's just look at the size difference because it really compares to a different cartridge that I already have on the table, and some of you probably already know what it is. There's the Creedmoor. I was wondering where that guy was. Now you can see a bit of a family resemblance, same 30-degree shoulder on him. But obviously the Creedmoor's a lot longer. That one's designed to fit the 308 length actions, an overall cartridge length of 2.8, I believe, in that one. And it's pretty similar to the one right beside it. And you recognize that? 243 Winchester. Of course, that's the 308 neck down to 24 caliber. And that's the one that really is in a horse race with that shorter little Grendel. Not this guy. And we're going to see those numbers right now. Now, I think before I get into all the numbers, I want to talk about the bullets because, as you could guess, with that short powder supply in there, there's only about 30 grains of water that can be held in that little case. So you're not going to be shooting the really heavy, long bullets that you can in the Creedmoor or the 260s or any of that faster 6.5s. So you're going to have a 95 grain, 100 grain, 120, 123 seems to be the sweet spot. Then they'll go up to about 130. This is 129 grain, I think, right here, the SST. So don't think that you're going to grab this guy and have those super high BC bullets. They'll still be pretty high, but not as high as what the Creedmoor can shoot or the PRC or any of those. So we are going to talk about the 123 grain because, like I say, that's the sweet spot. You get kind of the best balance of everything. And then we'll compare it to one of the heavier ones, the 129. And then we're going to compare it to the Creedmoor and the 243 Winchester. So real quick, look at your charts here, drops and drifts and all. On the 123 at 100 yards, if you zero 2.8 inches high, it's only going to have about 0.8 inches of wind deflection in a 10-mile-an-hour right angle wind, and you're putting 1,587 foot-pounds of energy. You'd expect something like that at 100 yards. 200 yards, your energy's still hanging in there, 1,379. You're only dropping 1.25 inches, or about 1.5 inches. Then at 300 yards, you're dropping 7 inches, so you're already past your maximum point-blank range for a 6-inch diameter target. 400 yards, look at the last number. You still have your energy above 1,000. And for everyone that agrees with that assessment of 1,000 foot-pounds of energy on target for a deer, this tells you that little Grendel's going to work out to 400 yards. All you have to do is figure out your drops and drifts, and they're really not that bad. Now let's look at the 129 grain bullet, this guy, because you would think it's going to hit harder, but there's some surprises here. Look what it's doing already at 100 yards. It does not have as much energy as that lighter bullet, and that's because of the velocity difference. You see that their BCs are not that far apart. There's a 510 BC on the 123 and a 530 on the 129. So you're really not gaining much there as far as the wind blowing them around. And you look down that chart all the way, and you do not gain anything until you match up at 400 yards. That suggests to me that the heavier bullet then will be retaining more energy beyond 400 yards. But when you're already looking at 25 inches of drop at 400 yards and 13 inches of wind deflection, I don't think you want to be taking this little guy much farther than that. So I would consider the Grendel a 400-yard cartridge, but I think for most folks, you're talking 250 yards. That's where it really shines. And we're going to get to a reason why it really shines in a little bit. But before we do, take a look at the 6.5 Creedmoor numbers and see how much more energy that puts downrange. Considerably, like 500 foot-pounds more energy. So if you think you need more energy, or you might want to hunt elk, yeah, you're going to be better off with the Creedmoor if you even think that's big enough. A lot of folks think that doesn't even count for elk, but a lot of guys will use it, and successfully. And part of the reason is that it keeps its energy up there pretty nicely. It doesn't drop as much, everything you'd expect, because there's just more powder in it. It's going that much faster. We're starting that thing off at 300 feet per second faster than that Grendel. So that's going to make a big difference. But here's the surprise. I wasn't real sure how that 240 was going to hang in there. I thought maybe it was going to be beat. Turns out it's not. At least not with the bullet I chose. I looked up a Sierra tipped Game King, and I used to shoot the 90 grains. They've come out, I guess, with a 95 grain now. I haven't even seen that yet. But I'm going to look into it because it has a high BC of 0.49. And you can drive that at 3,000 feet per second pretty regularly. That's what most factory loads will do for you. A lot of hand loaders will say, well, I'm easily getting 3,100 feet per second. Well, good. You can do that. But I kind of have to stick with factory loads here for people who don't hand load. But this gives us a good idea. But look at how the trajectories and the wind deflection and the energy downrange compare against both of the Grendel loads. That 243 is beating him. All the way out to 400 yards, it carries more energy with a lighter bullet. So it's shooting flatter. It's deflecting a little bit less in the wind. This really surprised me. So if you were thinking, gosh, I think I'll go with that heavier bullet in that little Grendel, it won't kick probably any more than the 243, but I'll have a more effective load for deer. Maybe not. Now, if you think the heavier bullet is going to do better, even though it has less energy, it will have more momentum perhaps, you might want to go with the Grendel. Here's the point. The Grendel and the 243 have about the same recoil. If you shoot them in the same weight rifle, it's going to be about the same recoil. And in an 8-pound rifle, it's going to be down around 8 to 9 foot-pounds of energy coming back at you at about 8 to 9 feet per second. So it's pretty balanced. But if you go to a lighter rifle, which I think is kind of the point by going to these little things, so you get down to, say, a 6.5-pound rifle with a scope on it, all field ready, then you're probably looking at around 10 to 10.5 foot-pounds, which is really pretty much nothing. Okay, when you consider the 30-06, the 270s and stuff are in the low 20s, yeah, there's a huge difference. You're just not going to suffer any kind of recoil. And that points to the benefit of these little cartridges. Small shooters, young shooters, new shooters, anyone who's got problems with their shoulders or their neck perhaps and can't take a lot of recoil, you've got a pretty effective little deer hunting cartridge here. Particularly if you stay inside of 300, preferably 250 yards. And that's what I hear from a lot of folks, is that they have found that Grendel to work really well inside of 250 yards. And their grandkids enjoy shooting it. There's no fear of recoil, so it's a great starter rifle. You're not going to develop a flinch. And the short action, that allows you to have a real handy rifle. And those initially came out in 14.5 to 16.5 inch barrels in those ARs. That was one of the things that Alexander was working on. He wanted to have that kind of performance in a really compact, handy military style rifle where weight matters a lot more than when you're hunting. So gosh, a 6.5 pound rifle field ready is pretty darn light, but with only 10 foot-pounds of recoil energy, that's a sweet shooter right there. So if you go with the Grendel rather than the 243, that would be the number one advantage, I think, is just to have that little bit shorter, quicker action. I don't think the deer cares what you've got, but they are fun. I mean, I've shot them and they just are so quick. It reminds me of running a bolt on a 22 rimfire. So that's one reason to have one. And then the other, of course, is the lighter bullets. Don't think that you're probably going to go to that Grendel and get that 143 grain long range bullet you would put on the 6.5 Creedmoor. It's just not recommended. I have never seen a factory load with it on, and they don't even suggest load recipes for it in the hand loading manuals. I'm sure you could do it, but the bullet just gets so long and impedes that powder space that you're just not going to have enough velocity to make it pay. So 123 grain bullet, that's the sweet spot. The 6.5 Grendel, yeah, seems kind of funny in the day and age when you've got a 26 Nosler and a 6.5 by 300 Weatherby Magnum going 3,500 to 3,600 feet per second. And the best this guy can come up with is about 25 to 2,600. Seems kind of funny, but it's a balance. It does what it needs to do for hunting. So why put up all that extra recoil and that expense and burning all that powder and all the noise? Yeah. If you're just looking for a nice, sweet shooting little deer hunting cartridge, I think that 6.5 Grendel might be worth a look. Hey, I'm Ron Spomer. Thanks for watching and invite you to subscribe to our channel. And we look forward to seeing you on the next one. In the meantime, hunt honest, shoot straight.